Let's get started. My name is Andrew Hughes. I'm Director of Identity Standards at Ping Identity, and I'm here to moderate a panel on what's actually going on in the real world with these mobile driver's license things. We have perspectives mostly from North America, but hopefully we'll get into some topics from other continents as well. We'll see. House rules. We need audience participation because we've only got about 15 minutes of material. And I tell a lot of bad jokes, as my friends and colleagues know, and I can tell a lot of them. So if a question occurs to you, stick up your hand, we'll get a mic to you. Even when we're talking, we like to have a conversation with you in the crowd, because that's what makes these panels really interesting, okay? So just do a few context slides here. So the question, are mobile driver's licenses real? We probably wouldn't be here if we didn't think they were real. So some background material. Now, if you saw Mindy Stevens yesterday present about mobile driver's licenses, that's an excellent session to go back and review. She sets out the history, what AMVA, the North American Motor Vehicle Administrators Association, is doing, and goes into a lot more detail about the infrastructure needed and the coordination needed for standards-based mobile driver's licenses. So highly recommend to go back and take a look at that. What is an ISO 18013-5 standard mobile driver's license? Well, these things are issued and cryptographically signed by driver licensing authorities to a mobile device. That's what we're calling a mobile driver's license. They're from the driver's license authority, so they're real, and they're mobile on your mobile device. It is actually authentic. We'll talk about regulations and how regulations are the cornerstone to make these digital credentials the real driver's license, as well as the plastic ones. And the people that contributed to writing the ISO standard are the issuers of driver's licenses. And that's a critical point that we'll see during the panel. Motor Vehicle Administrator Associations around the world were in the ISO workgroup meetings contributing their requirements and text to the specifications. So they reflect, as driver's licenses, what driver's license administrators need. And jurisdictions are starting to update their laws. So these are not just pictures of plastic driver's licenses. These are backed in regulations and laws, and they're becoming, in jurisdiction by jurisdiction, equivalent to the plastic. So a few words about the standard. ISO 18013-5, which will be burned into your brain by the end of the session. Mobile driver's license app was published in September 2021, and the uptake has been astonishing. Right? This all requires infrastructure, and the infrastructure is rolling out. Very simply, it's a data object, and it has the data elements that you find on your plastic driver's card. It's a driver's license. Cryptographically signed by the driving authority. It's on the mobile phone, as I said before. And in this version of the standard, it's intended for in-person physical presentation over radio waves. Said another way, NFC, Bluetooth, QR code, Wi-Fi aware, that's how you present the data to the verifier. And then the cryptographic checks are done. You don't hand your phone over. You send it, as you would expect, using cryptographic techniques to verify it. And it allows you to do selective data release as well. Or are they real? I'm a standards person. I love standards. They describe ideal worlds. But these things are actually real. They're real software and real hardware. There are lots of pilots, and there are several US states and other jurisdictions in production. This is part of an awareness campaign to let everyone in industry and the consumers of MDLs know that they will be able to ask for one within the next 5 to 10 years, right? It's taking a long time. It will take a long time to get them out there, but it started. The issuers are building the infrastructure for the PKI and the keys that are needed to support these things. And in North America, TSA is accepting MDL to get through the TSA checkpoint at airports. This is a very tiny map It's the AMVA, American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, AMVA. This is self-reported data from the driver's license offices, MVAs, about sort of where they're at. Anything in pink, they're doing research or figuring out legislation to support these things. Anything in solid green, they're live, they're in production. Dotted green, they're sort of in the last stage of the pilot. And the other colors are some flavor of implementation. But these are all 18013.5 based MDLs. And if you want to find out which airports you should route yourself through to try these things out, these are them. Arizona went first. Maryland was announced a few weeks ago. And very, very interestingly, a few days ago, American Airlines, you can use your American Airlines app to get through the TSA checkpoint using the app as identification. And it's using ISO 18013.5 data transmission and verification, just like a driver's license. So we're eagerly seeing how that goes. Okay. Was that enough context? Any questions so far? There's one right there. Stop, hold on. Give me a mic. You surprised me.
That's great context, so thank you for that opening. Does the MDL actually transfer if you get a new phone, and how does that actually happen?
That's not in the specification.
Okay, got it.
My friends laugh because I always say it's out of scope, whatever it is I'm asked about. No, this is, at this point in time, backup recovery, multi-device, loss and recovery, that's all implementation right now. We don't know how to standardize it because there are so many ways. We lose sleep about it, but right now we're not standardizing it. We'll leave that down there.
I have a question.
Oh, one more there, Zach?
Can I ask one?
Oh, Lorraine first, then Zach. Yeah.
So Andrew, you mentioned the PKIs are being stood up. Can you talk to that in terms of where they are with that, as well as trust across the multiple PKIs?
Sure. You can talk about that, right?
Sure. I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Chad Hutchinson. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. We at Florida, as the issuing authority, control our route certificates as part of that PKI process. But one of the missing pieces that we're really looking forward to, and I think is going to really make the mobile driver's license concept interoperable between multiple states, is AMVA's digital trust service. So you could think of this as a centralized key store, basically. And I don't know where they are in the works. I know they did a procurement for that.
Yeah, so the AMVA board has approved the funding to run the pilot. They'll do lessons learned, and in 2023, they're going to decide how to stand up the infrastructure.
And the way Florida, as an issuing authority, the way we would envision that working is we would provision our certificates as the route authority like we do now, and we would seed it in the DTS service so that relying parties could consume that and leverage.
Okay. And Zach?
I'll just give a quick plug to Mike McCaskill from AMVA speaking about the digital trust service at the FedID conference in September. So just say that. The American Airlines application, I hadn't seen that news. So when you say they can get in with the application, is it the American Airlines application or just the mobile driver's license application? Because if the attributes from the MDL are being cross-populated to the American Airlines app, that's very interesting, and I'm just kind of curious to get a little more info.
So at this point in time, I've just seen the press release. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the technical team, and I get to see it. So sorry for the timing. My understanding is that it's the American Airlines app running an SDK by an identity provider. I believe that's what it is. Okay. That's great. That's a great start. Okay, let's start with some of the topics that we thought we might cover. Thank you. So, Yash, give us a 20-second intro.
My name is Yash. I am the CTO co-founder of Credence. At Credence, we provide relying party solutions that can accept these MDLs for the time being in an in-person environment, whereby you can have the tap and go experience. And it's just instead of putting your hand in your pocket and taking your card out and handing over, you have a more delightful experience, as they all say, where you're tapping and sharing it through the ISO 18013-5 protocol.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. Well, since you made everyone else, that leaves me to be Terrence. I'm Terrence Samuel. I'm the director of the Office of Motorist Modernization at the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. My office is responsible for modernizing legacy applications and processes. And a couple of years ago, when we started this journey back in 2020, the mobile driver's license was added to my portfolio of projects to complete. I will say I had hair then, it was longer than Chad's. So you can see as a result what has happened to me since then. So thank you.
But we still recommend you proceed with the project, right? Yeah. Don't let that scare you. Okay, who here read the news about Apple devices being able to present mobile driver's licenses to TSA for boarding? Okay, good. So I don't have to explain that. Yash, is that? Did you introduce yourself when you answered your question?
Yeah, hi again. I'm Chad Hutchinson, the Chief Technology Officer for Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. I'm responsible for all the technical bits, which includes security stuff, includes solution design, bandwidth, network, all that good stuff. So I'm the reason he doesn't have hair.
He gets 2 intros. Wow.
Well, the technology is the most important thing, right?
He said because I will turn to him to answer questions I can't answer.
I definitely get blamed first. That's
Okay, so the TSA Apple deal, Yash. So I think that's a game changer because all of a sudden you have demand and supply, and that's always good when you're trying to introduce new stuff. What's your opinion? Like, how do you see it as a game changer or not for adoption of MDL in North America?
No, that's a great question. So yesterday I was here and somebody was saying that you don't want to witness the making of 3 things, sausages, legislation, and standards. The MDL part of it has been in that making for the last 5 years, and the standard, as Andrew just said, just got confirmed in September. And in March, people in Arizona were traveling through using their MDLs. Standards are great. A bunch of really smart people can get together and come up, agree on a limited amount of stuff. But to actually see issuing authorities from different states, our DMVs, where we go to get our driver's license, now turn themselves into issuing authorities of digital driver's licenses across different states. To see a federal agency like TSA accept it, add it as a 29th or 30th credential that you can present, and major technology providers with 140 million handsets around in the US itself or more, adopt it, integrate it, release it. It's nothing short of a miracle for it to come together. And as I have some friends and family who are now traveling through Arizona and Maryland, they call the experience scary awesome, right? You have, whereby you're tapping your phone or watch while keeping one hand in your wallet just in case it won't work, kind of a thing, right? So, but it does, and they go through, and as, from an adoption perspective, for them to kind of feel this awesomeness and change this decade-old habit of taking a card out of your wallet, and 4.7 million people in Arizona can do it, 4.1 million people in Maryland can do it. It definitely is a game changer. And it has taken 5 long years of all these participants coming together to make it really happen.
And Yash, so the delightful experience of travelers. I know your company makes hardware readers for the mobile device, for the MDLs. So it's no good to have a mobile driver's license on your phone if you can't present it and have it cryptographically verified. Could you, so tap me, yeah.
Sure. MDL is not a flash pass. You can't take it out of your wallet and say, here's my MDL, right? The whole standard is designed to be transmitted and doing that. And if we think about it, what are the top 3 things that we use our driver's license today for? Right? So travel, law enforcement, unfortunately, right, if you get pulled over, and buying age-restricted products. And the first, all of these use cases are in-person use cases, right? So we develop small square-like pucks that you can attach to POS systems, plug it into a wall, and all the smarts of the standard software-wise are in there. And you can control them from anywhere through a central cloud-based system, right? Push new certs, blah, blah, blah. And enabling this, doing it in a cost-effective, delightful experience is critical to adoption on the other side. Because if you can't really use it, then you know that app goes on the second page of your home screen and you never touch it, right? You can, and I think more places where we can provide preferred experiences, and for relying parties, think about it from their perspective. Today, it costs you nothing to prove your identity. Using just, you reach out, you take something out, costs nothing. So now how do we make it even better? And even, how do we give them the preferred experience and at a really affordable way, technology? So I think that, and it's a complicated standard, and to bring a product out during the pandemic with supply chain issues where, you know, car manufacturing was stopped and because of chip shortages.
So tell us the story about the chipset.
Yeah, so
And Bluetooth.
the standard requires you to engage using QR code or NFC and then follow it up with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi aware. But those are very, in order for you to do that, there are very specific chips that you have to use so that you can access that data from iOS device or an Android device. And unfortunately, they're the same chips that go in smartphones, that go in cars, and the standard was fluid at the same time, right? So we started developing this back in 2019, 2020, yeah. And initially we thought we'd have to take a picture of the screen, and how would we do that?
I remember those design
yeah,
sessions.
Yeah,
They were not
and how do we get these special NFC chips that are made, that are designed to work with all handsets? And it ended up taking a huge iterative toll, you know, working together with the standards body and us. And sometimes we ended up paying $300 for a chip that usually cost 10, right? Because getting it to the relying parties was important. To prove out that the relying party solution exists and it can be done was important, very important. It closes the loop on the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to surprise my panelists. Okay, so remember, we want this to be a conversation with the room. Chad, I'm warning you, I'm about to ask you a question. We've got a question back here.
Thank you. Yash, you spoke about the in-person use cases. What about the remote?
Andrew will tell you that's not yet in the standard, but.
So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a standards guy, and standards sometimes describe an ideal world. We're working on the online remote presentation. As it happened, there's market pressure to get the standard published, and the driving administrators really needed the in-person for all of their uses. So when we had to cut scope to get the thing published, we focused on the uninvented thing that had not been invented, which is the wireless protocols between MDL and reader. And we put the remote presentation for day 2, and it's day 2. And it's approaching high noon on day 2, and we're working really hard on those.
Yeah.
Sir?
So Rachel told me on Tuesday to be politely paranoid, so I'm being
Please.
politely paranoid. When you have a physical driver's license situation, the TSA agent can see the photo, they can see the height, the weight, the eye color, and that prevents user collusion. So a bad guy who's not on a no-fly list can't give his driver's license to a bad guy who is on a no-fly list. How do you prevent a bad guy who's not on a no-fly list from giving his phone to a good guy who is on a no-fly list, to a bad guy who is on a no-fly list?
Specifically with the TSA in-person presentation use case, the photograph inside the mobile driver's license is sent for facial recognition, one-to-one facial matching to the TSA agent. And for that,
So it phones home, it's not a,
it does not phone home.
it doesn't phone home. So, okay, so
No,
the,
so the
the
mobile
photo is
phone-
encrypted with the,
Just like your driver's license today, yes. Yeah, the photograph is inside, and for specific high security purposes, you would send the photo, in this case to the TSA, who has a defined purpose for it, and the agent sees the photo and they actually have a one-to-one face matching to compare you with the photo. So in that case.
Double check, right? So when you unlock, I'm not usually loud enough. When you share, you have to share by unlocking your phone with your Face ID or your Touch ID. And then after that, you transmit the data to the relying party, including the official photo that you have at your DMV.
Sure, but you can register someone else's biometrics on your device.
Oh,
Well,
yes, you're right. So,
But Yash, the critical thing is that the data in the mobile driver's license is the same data that's on the plastic card. And it's the presentation of the signed photo and your physical presence in front of the agent and the camera, that's the binding check.
so you're taking a real-time picture of at that moment with the picture in the driver's license. Pretty much how you would do it in the physical world. In the analog world, officer would look at it and then look at you and say, yeah, it looks like the same. In the digital world.
And it's similar for an age verification as well. You know, so if you go into a bar and purchase age-restricted products like alcohol, there's going to be that picture element that's also transmitted in addition to an assertion that you're of age. So there would be part of the visual workflow, right, of the cashier on the other side, you know, doing like he's saying, yeah, that's actually you.
Got it, thanks.
Thank you. One back. I don't know who's first.
Ladies first, yeah.
We're not going to touch too much on the actual implementation issues around the photograph today because they're unsolved. Right? Good.
Interstate, and used in Arizona, MDL in Maryland.
Yes, once the infrastructure is rolled out. It's not rolled out yet. There's no digital trust service for the PKI.
I'll ask
Jeff?
mine. I'll ask mine since I have the microphone. There are all sorts of privacy-related things that you can restrict what information is passed. So,
Correct.
like at the bar, you don't necessarily give them your address and so forth. Is the photo always sent? So, what are the situations? I mean, how do you achieve really any protection against a stolen MDL in those use cases if you don't always send the photo?
Okay, the photo is a double-edged sword, and it is certainly not solved. We have the ability in the standards, in the protocols, to selectively release information. We understand that in the in-person use case, the photo is reliable for verifying the person. We have not resolved the online use case, and that is one of them. Now, before we go to more questions, Chad, in the Florida project, what stage are you in with issuing MDLs and getting them out into the field, and experience with relying parties as well?
So, do you want to go first, Terrence? I'll let Terrence tackle that one first as the director.
Okay.
No, that's fine. Actually, we have, well, I want to touch on one thing first, the Apple comment about game changer. I believe it is, and not just simply because of TSA, it's because it's Apple. Last September, Chad and I just finished a conference with some of our stakeholders. I decided to take some time off after the conference, and boom, there was the announcement from Apple with the first 8 states. I'm on vacation. Every device that I had started ringing or pinging. People started calling me. People that I thought were my friends were calling me, criticizing, why is Florida not on this list? I mean, literally, I received text messages all day. So once I got to the office, we started working towards, of course, having some conversations. But within Florida right now, we actually got authority in Florida to start research or start a mobile DL back in 2014. And so every year, in order to get funding for modernization, which this is part of, I have to go before the Senate or the House committees, report to the governor's office on our state of where we are in a project. And but when we started this year, they says, well, you got authority back in 2014. Why are you starting now? You know, it's 2020. Well, of course, we started talking about standards, lack of standards. We were one of the states. We wanted to wait until the standards were there. We used the AMVA guidelines and the ISO standards, so we started this. So Timelines were tight. Honestly, we missed the first two implementations, but we finally, in November of last year, we implemented, and the first implementation was you had to go and create an account with our online customer portal, sign up that way. We would send you the QR code, you scan it and sign up that way. Back in February this year, we moved to in-app enrollment, where it's all done by scanning the card and then facial rec, which we go and, of course, compare your photo and you're able to sign up. So right now, our app is available out in the Play Store and the App Store, but I will tell you, we have done no campaigning, no media blitz, nothing. We have just been working through bugs as they come up. We still consider this to be, although it's out there, it's available. I had a chance to make a new friend yesterday who has the app, who I'm glad I met. So we've been talking through some things, but we need that feedback. So we've been waiting before we do this campaign to work through as many things as possible. So that's kind of where we are now. I don't know, Chad, if you had anything to add.
No, but I would also want to chime in on the TSA game-changing question. I do think the fact that Apple has chosen to do a credential that supports ISO 180.13-5 in their wallet is going to be the game changer, not necessarily the use case being TSA. It's just the momentum or the wake behind that with other retailers, and that's really going to be the game-changing part of that, I think.
Yeah,
And
one thing.
I'm sorry, really quickly, and my point was with all my friends and everybody calling me, and they didn't even know what the use cases were going to be. It's the fact that Apple made this announcement. That's the pressure that we were, feeling. So.
And yeah, just to reemphasize the standards-based and interoperable nature of the data, and as mentioned out there, a driver's license is used the way it is today, right? You can use it in many jurisdictions, cross-border, multiple countries. That ideal is designed into the standard as well. So once the PKIs are deployed, implemented, and everything's rolling out, they will be readable in cross jurisdictions.
And specifically in the case of TSA, for that to work, so let's say Apple sets up the certificate trust with them, right? So it's working from an Apple wallet with TSA. If we, Florida, want to now for our mobile driver license app to work with TSA, until that digital trust service that I mentioned is in place, we're going to have to work with TSA to seat our certificate, right, as our issuing authority certificate. So that process would work. So that's how the interoperability is going to work in the short term. When the digital trust servers put in place, it'll be a centralized repository that can be, pulled in from a lot of these apps.
Today there's just one relying party, right, which is TSA.
TSA.
And so everybody, all the issuing authorities can submit their certificates to them. However, I think I was louder without it. But in order to make it an end-to-end relationship where multiple issuing authorities and multiple relying parties are able to accept it, this digital trust service, which Amber is setting up, by the way, they've done a great job helping all their constituents with providing policy, technical support, organizing pop-ups to really help DMVs become issuing authorities. It's a huge change.
And I believe there was also interoperability workshops. I don't know if those were conducted by AMVA, where where a lot of these companies would come together and test the interoperability in real time to make sure that worked.
That's why we're seeing them actually arrive in production now. We've been doing interoperability testing within the standards work group since 2019, figuring out what the incompatibilities were.
So a lot of people have been asking, implementation questions, how it works. I'm going to ask kind of a philosophy question on this. I work for state government. I don't now, but I worked for state government for a lot of years. Talked to the, DMV, the motor vehicle directors, people doing that, and there was always a discussion. And they would tell me, we are not issuing a government ID. We are issuing a license to drive a vehicle. And so we always had that debate of, are you issuing a license to drive, or are you issuing a digital identity? So I don't know if you have that discussion in Florida, but that was often a discussion we had. Maybe it's old school. We are issuing a license to drive a vehicle, and other people just happen to use it to verify your identity.
I think honestly that philosophy in Florida is probably changing. We see ourselves as the identity agency. Everyone has to come in Florida right now to verify identity. We are that agency. So I think I certainly get your point about the your driver's license is used to verify to prove that you're should and able to drive a vehicle. But I think that philosophy is starting to change now with this conversation about MDL. But that's a great point.
And we also support just an ID, which is just a driver's license without a driving privilege.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We always say mobile DL, but in Florida you can also have a
Identification
digital,
card.
mobile DL. I'm sorry, ID card as well, starting at age 5. So
Terrence, are you finding that, so in every jurisdiction it's different. In some states, it's the CIO's office is the identity office, right? They have birth records and so on in that political structure, legislative structure. In other words, the identity department is the DMV. Where does Florida fit into that kind of model? Where are you working with the state CIO's office, or are you separate? How's that sort of working?
we are separate, but we are working with the state CIO's office. The state CIO currently, in previous years, was a state representative and had a lot of input on the design of the MDL, and so is very involved even now to this point on the MDL project.
Okay,
so
great. We've got a question. Okay.
So to follow up on the Apple comments you made, Terrence and Chad, yeah? Context, I'm an iPhone user from the very first iPhone, you know. But my credit cards are in Apple Wallet, and now my identity is going to be in the Apple Wallet. Sorry? Exactly. And I work on MDL standard. There's certain aspects of a standard that where functionalities are technically limited only to one mobile OS provider that we're talking about here. And it sounded like there should be those compromises in terms of correlation of my data, of this technical aspect that limits selection of wallets to some extent, but to some extent they actually do limit selection of wallets. So it's a business concern for other players as well. A lot of companies contribute to the standard, to the interoperability event, and now suddenly on one of the OSs there's some limitations. But it sounded like those should be compromised for the sake of this great user experience because it's Apple and people like using Apple products. And I feel like issuing authorities are one of those key players, of course relying parties too, but those key players who have that, not power, but opportunity to talk those aspects through that we don't necessarily have in the standards community always. So could you, I don't know how much you can speak to this, but could you elaborate a bit more on that? Because the tone that it's convenient, it's a game changer was slightly concerning from my experience and from what I know.
You know, the standard is not OS dependent, right? And today, many states, including Florida, will issue you a MDL into eventually Google Wallet, Apple Wallet, and their own jurisdiction apps, right? So there's jurisdiction apps, there's the mobile OS wallet, and there's even private companies in some places that may publish a wallet that can issue it. American Airlines, we just learned today, is one such example, right? So the standard or implementation of the standard is not dependent on an OS, right? It doesn't say, oh, the standard cannot be implemented on Android or cannot be implemented on Windows. As a matter of fact, at the MDL Interop, I saw the first Windows PC implementation of the standard also, right? And everybody who contributed to the standard, and Andrew has been a big part of it, this was a very
And Christina.
and Christine. Yeah. So it was. It was very conscious. Every bit of it was very consciously done to not have any dependency on one handset manufacturer or the other.
So the non-technical factors that lead towards platform dominance. So that is obviously a thorny question.
Yes, I'll take a stab at that. And so really, in my mind, the dominance of Apple that you mentioned is going to be the game changer because it's going to make other relying parties come to play. I mean, it's not necessarily just about Apple or the technology part of it, but I think just like you said, and I'm also an Apple user, I'm excited to have the wallet concept. It's going to make other people like TSA or American Airlines or these other players come forth and want to actually participate. Because right now, one of the challenges we have is that chicken and the egg thing. You know, we can work on the Holder app, the mobile driver's license, but if there are no relying parties out there for that other side of it, right, that's challenging. So I think in that sense, a player like Apple or a Samsung or a Google, when they start to talk about implementing ISO 18013-5, you know, that's going to be the game changer. It's just going to be a lot of relying parties coming to the table then that probably wouldn't have. They would have taken more of a wait and see mode, most likely. Does that make sense?
And I think my comment was about it being a game changer was just simply because driving adoption. Like I mentioned earlier, the phone calls that I was receiving when that first announcement came out, they had no idea what the use cases were going to be. I'm not an Apple user. I give him a hard time about it all the time. But that was my comment about being a game changer. And right now, as he mentioned, you can use the Florida app outside of the Apple Wallet. And we've met with every major vendor as well, not only Apple. But so if a customer chooses to have their mobile deal outside of the Apple Wallet, they can do that as well. So it's not dependent, as you said, on any kind of on the platform there. So
and one thing that we're eagerly watching, intently watching, is what happens in Europe with the digital identity wallet work that's going on, because that is a specific attempt to provide alternatives to the platform plays. Now, another question, please.
Thanks, Andrew. Steve Wilson from Lockstep in Australia. I wanted to go from the philosophy to something that's real and legal, because that question has been around for 25 years in my experience. Excuse me. What is the legal basis for a driver's license for ID? Is anybody in the states legislating or drafting bills to codify that? Because it seems to me that there's been two cases of plastic licenses being used. One of them is legitimised in Australia by KYC, because the KYC law expressly says 50 points for any state driver's licence. Of course, if you unpack that, it's actually not identity, it's just ticking a compliance box. The other one, of course, is that the 16-year-old at the video store will take my driver's licence, but there's no basis for that. That question's been around forever. Is anybody actually going to solve it? Like legitimise it in the digital space? Because what happens when you codify things when you go digital? That's when the waste hits the ventilator, because the 16-year-old gets away with it because it's not codified. But when you computerise it, everything becomes precise and traceable.
I think if I was to rephrase, the question would be, is legislation working on formalizing the driver's license being an identity document, I guess.
Well, identity document or just a driver's license.
Or should it just be driver's license, right? I hand it over to Terrence. I mean, my simple philosophy on this is, it depends on if the relying party is willing to accept it or is okay with accepting a document, then that's what it is, right? Whether it's the store that you go to, or they don't have a mandate which says it must be this. They take that, or even think of it in a private closed loop context of your employee badge. Employers are issuing it and they're accepting it, and if the next door employer also is willing to accept it, or the parking lot is willing to accept it, then it's an ecosystem. So, but of course, in the legal framework, it's a different one.
Yeah, and we have, during past sessions, added legislation for the MDL in Florida and also to address privacy issues as well. So did I miss anything with the legislation?
No, we've codified it as a digital driver's license in very generic terms. But in Florida also, we don't, it doesn't replace the physical card. It's an optional in addition to the card. You're still required in Florida by statute to carry your physical card. And like we were saying at the beginning, you know, this is an emerging thing. You're not going to get those kind of changes overnight or possibly ever. I don't know.
From the floor.
Oh, g'day. John from New Zealand. Just some quick questions. I've got two for you. One is, I assume you guys are aware of the fraud happening with the New South Wales driver's licence?
Not standards-based.
Not standard.
So just, is there
That's all I got to say about it.
Okay.
Not even close, right? Not even close.
Not standards-based.
Cool, because I thought from the original, one of the original slides that Austroads had accepted the standard, so thanks for clarifying that.
Ostro's in Queensland.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. And here's a question for Terrence. Okay, so we're talking about enabling a digital driver's license, but currently that's and you still have to provide a card, so you've still got that cost of producing that card. In the future, are you guys looking at also issuing a digital driver's license from when the driver actually passes the test and goes to drive? So at the beginning of the transaction, saving cost and better user experience?
Well, we've had all sorts of conversations that has been discussed, but I can tell you, at least right now, we have no plans on doing that currently. But I will tell you that each session, there is more and more interest in the mobile driver's license and use cases. So who knows what the future may hold. But for right now, there are no plans to do what you just mentioned, but
Terrence,
to replace it.
I know you work a lot with law enforcement in Florida. Are they accepting of this idea of a mobile driver's license yet? Are you seeing any movement? Because everyone here, possibly everyone here, assumes that law enforcement is driving this. And I know that's not true. No. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're working with them to understand what it is?
So we were at the Florida Department of Highway Safety. One of the divisions that we have there at the department is the Florida Highway Patrol. The Florida Highway Patrol, the colonel, everybody reports up through our executive director. So we started out meeting with them internally within the organization and talking to them about the mobile DL and some other law enforcement organizations as well. Immediately, of course, there was pushback because, number one, they thought that they had to grab or take possession of someone's phone. So there's education we had to do there. Of course, we explained to them that in Florida, with our implementation, there's a verifier app that you use to read the mobile ID, the mobile driver's license. One of the things that I think in a couple weeks, I'm going to a law enforcement conference and speak to over 300-400 law enforcement officials about the mobile driver's license as well. I think there's interest there, but one of them stopped me in the hallway the other day and they said, you know, we've ordered in Florida, I think, like 1,000 devices as a pilot for the Florida Highway Patrol to read MDLs if they happen to stop you and you have one. So we're looking forward to that. But the thing that they want is more integration into the systems that they have already. The officer wants to walk up to the car, scan your MDL, and have it send the information back to his terminal in the car so he doesn't have to go back there and type everything over again. Right now, we don't have that. I think once we get that in place and we show law enforcement how it can save them time and make law enforcement stops safer and quicker for them, I think they'll be on board. But right now, the agencies that we have met with, they do see that this is coming. They are on board, but they're a little reluctant right now because they want, hey, how's this going to save me time? You know, I need this back in the car. I don't need to type this all over again.
Yeah, is it actually safe?
How's it safer for me as well?
And those delightful experiences.
We have a question from the floor.
Have to be created where we are right now in the standard and the journey is, as Terrence mentioned, wouldn't it be nice if they can, without even rolling down the window, scan the QR code, get the data, and by the time they walk back to the cruiser, the data is already in their cruiser's computer and run a search.
Yeah, and in addition to the liability thing that Terrence mentioned, there's also the aspect that they don't want to carry a device too, because that's a safety issue, right? One more thing to think about when you're facing a roadside stop situation. So what we found is a lot of them want to integrate with their onboard computers, whether it's using Wi-Fi direct, straight from the car. So it's going to be interesting to see how that grows.
Right. It has the potential, but the relying party solutions have to be created. And I'm sure Terrence is doing the same with law enforcement, with retail, with the liquor board. Every DMV that we've spoken to has to educate this, their relying parties on how to accept it, because people show up and they're like, I want my age-restricted good, and that's an issue.
Why would they have to go back to their car if they've got a computing device in their hand?
They may not have a computing device in their hand.
Right. If they do, they can use that. I mean, that would be the choice, I think, right? The deployment model is going to be specific to the law enforcement agency.
Yeah,
and
this
their
is
budget.
part of the education and awareness, because they're so new that we don't actually know what the best mode of operation should be. Question here.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm not seeing it other than the Florida or the police piece and safety. That actually makes a lot of sense, being able to present that information quickly. I'm just wondering why. I mean, why are you going through all of this effort there's a lot of resources and a lot of effort going into something that I don't understand the problem that it's solving.
I'll take a crack at it first, right? So today, think about what do we have to do for IDB? You have to take a digital record that is in your DMV, print it out in a physical analog paper plastic, and then take a phone camera, convert it back into a digital record through tons of algorithms and probabilities that come into it, and then be able to prove who we are, share it in our digital online world. It's an inefficient and a probabilistic process that we have to do, because that's the limitation of today's tech. This standard has the potential, and the ecosystem that our agencies are building has the potential to really take out those inefficiencies and provide us, the taxpayer, a way better experience to proving out our identity. Tons of debate has to be there. How do we make it privacy preserving? How do we make our identity stored? Of course, we have to take that into account. But if you just go down to the basic science of it, what we're doing today is highly inefficient. And this has the promised land of going digital to digital.
Yeah, and I can give you some actual concrete efficiencies that we're looking at that aren't traditional in this space, but we have sister agencies that were having issues, and actually, Florida was in the public after COVID about some of the failures around identity proofing with some of our systems for like unemployment systems. So in our mind, this is an efficiency that would allow Florida citizens to be able to leverage their mobile driver's license as part of those processes, because we can work with those sister agencies to support it. So part of their workflows where it's doing an ID check or an identity proofing part of it, we're looking at those efficiencies, and we're actually talking to a couple of our state agencies now. So that's one of our use cases that we're going to get efficiencies out of as well.
Okay. And we've got about 1 minute left, and I see all these people who just missed the best session of the conference. One last question, and then we'll close.
Hi. So I work for a company that authenticates physical documents now, and we're working on authenticating MDLs. And my question is, part of the process, and I'll do it fairly quickly.
Hold it closer.
Oh, sorry. So we know that you can start the communication via NFC tap, which does the certs and everything, and then you either send through Wi-Fi or BLE to transmit the payload and stuff. I have a question about the QR code component, right? So if it's a QR code instead of like the NFC tap to begin that, is that initiated by the mobile driver's license, the person, or the relying party would show the QR code? Who's showing the QR code to be scanned?
The verifier.
The verifier.
The person. Yeah. The person is showing, the holder of the MDL is showing
the QR code to be scanned.
He's right.
Cool. All right. That was my understanding, but I want to make sure before we build on. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we're at time. So thank you very much for your attention and great questions. It was a great conversation. We're here. You've got our contact information up here. Please engage with us. We want to learn more from you. So thank you.